It was like my normal Saturday. I was out cutting the 2-acre lot with a push lawnmower for my dad's boss. It was an 8 to 10 hour job back then, which paid me a whole $10. At 10 years old, I thought it was good money. This year was my third and last summer. I was now getting $15. The boss's wife said I was getting too old. My dad had even paid for the gas. It would take me years before I found out why. The boss's daughter, who was about my age, would often come out and sit on a chair on the patio and watch me work. I kind of found that odd. If I needed a drink of water, I would get it from an outside water hose. I never knew her name. I never asked. I was a working stiff just like my dad, and she was considered part of the upper class. Her father's home was built on Snob Hill, where all the rich families lived. When I was done, I would knock on their back door and one of the kitchen staff would call my dad to get me a ride home. The following Monday, when my dad got home, he always had the money for the job I had done. This Saturday it changed. I saw her head into their swimming pool and not come up. I ran into the area, divided into the pool fully clothed, and pulled her out. A few pushes on her chest brought her around, and she started to cough. Water bubbled from her mouth. Her mother came running out in a panic, accusing me of molesting her young daughter. I, in her eyes, was an evil animal. Although the girl tried to explain to her mother, she wouldn't listen. She was lying. As a result, I got fired on the spot. I would finish the job that day and not come back. The sun dried my clothes off as I finished the yard. Keith McKibben's daughter watched me from the upper balcony. For the rest of the day, I dreaded having to face my father. On the way home, I told my father what happened. He said he believed me. Keith McKibben's wife, he said, was just looking for an excuse to get rid of me. She's a woman who has mental problems and she never leaves the house, my dad said. As a result, her husband Keith had to do everything. On Monday, when he came home from work, my dad brought me a huge $50 bill. It was the first one I had seen in my life. At the age of 13, I thought I was rich. When I asked him why, my dad said it was a bonus from his boss for saving his daughter's life. Remember, son, that what you say and do can be verified by someone else. It was the truth that won out in this situation. Keith McKibben noticed the bruises on his daughter's body that she was trying to hide. They had started appearing about 6 months after her marriage to Evan McBride. Evan was a brute of a man, born with a silver spoon because his family was old money. Evan was smart. He never hid her where it could not be hidden by clothing. He himself had discovered what was going on by accident. Evan could never appreciate the value of an honest day's work. His daughter Irene was as stubborn and mule-headed as he was, and she would not admit even to him what was really going on. The simplest of things could be the trigger that set Evan off. Everything he did went to the extreme. He thought he was above and better than anyone else. It was noticeable in everything he did. Keith has sworn a vow to himself he would get his daughter out of the nightmare she called a marriage. He saw it for what it was: enslavement. The question bothering him for weeks was, how could he accomplish it? What she had seen in him he did not know, but no matter what, she was trying to stay in the relationship that she didn't deserve. She was old school. She had made her bed and would stay in it. Sadly, she had learned that value from him because of his walk in life. What she needed was a white knight to push her thinking and change her point of view. He knew of one, but that had been years ago. Since then, they had drifted apart, not by choice but by the circumstances of life. His former wife had seen him as nothing but someone with no class and had treated him as nothing more than a servant. He had wondered how a boy so young could take its stride while doing the job he was hired to do for so long. He was the only boy he had ever hired to cut his lawn that he did not have to follow up with the weed whacker to trim the edges. It came to him during the darkness of night. He woke up with the knowledge staring right in front of him. The white knight from his daughter's childhood was single and working in the capital, according to his father. His father was a group leader in one of the plants he owned and was one of the shop stewards for the union. He had worked his way up from a floor sweeper over the years and was a valuable employee. Everyone in the plant respected him. He would promote Bill Davis to management and throw in a 5-year paid membership to the Meadows Golf Club, which was needing an influx of fresh blood drastically if it was to survive. Once a month the club held a free dinner to welcome the new members and their guests. It would be easy to suggest that Bill should invite his son. It was a gamble, but one worth trying. I never saw Keith McKibben at his home. I had only met him a couple of times in my life. We both had gone on with our lives. I was working in the capital of the state in a junior accounting position with a national firm, having graduated from university 3 years ago as an accountant majoring in corporate mergers. Like all newbies, I was stuck doing the grunt work behind the scenes. It was the last day of the week when I received the unexpected phone call from my father. He wanted to know if I could come home to attend a function at the Meadows Golf Club. The exclusive club was for members only and their guests. To get a membership, you had to be approved by the board. For years it had been my father's dream just to see the inside of the building. Membership fees were about $2,000 a year back then. For him, it was a lot of money. He could never see himself justifying the expense, as raising his children came first. I knew for him this was big. I asked him how he got into that place. My dad said, Keith McKibben has just promoted me to management and it comes with a fully paid membership. Dad and Mom were expected for a welcome dinner for new members and their guests at 7 tomorrow night in the club's restaurant. Afterward, it was assumed they would attend the ballroom dance. Formal attire is required, so please can you come? I was tickled to be asked, but I had other plans. It would be my first date in months. My dad said, your mother and I would like you to be our first guest. I gave in. I said I would leave as soon as I got my formal suit and dress shoes from my apartment, letting him know I would be home around midnight. I felt proud of my father's success. His years of hard work and dedication was finally being rewarded. I would learn later that the years had not been kind to Keith McKibben, as he was now wheelchair-bound and divorced. His date for the night was a longtime friend, the sister of his brother's wife. When I first got there with my parents, before I had even sat down, I had seen him. Keith was a proud man and deserved to be treated accordingly. Out of respect for the man, I had walked right up to Keith to shake his hand. His lady friend asked me how I knew him. I replied, you never forget the man who gave you your first job. That seemed to bring a big smile into his face. Keith and I got into a great chat about things. I guess I helped make the dinner successful for him. His date said in a private moment while we were dancing, I have not seen him in this good of mood in months. I think it might be because of you. We were in the ballroom that was only used about once a month. I, like my father, I was in awe of everything. It was an honor to be allowed into such a regal place. I had danced numerous times with both Keith's date and my mother. I was escorting my mom back to our table when the unknown lady walked in fashionably late. It appeared to me that everyone in the room was looking at her just like I was. I asked who was the lady that got the room to stop. My mom said that's Keith's daughter Irene. I wonder where her husband is, she said very softly. Speaking so no one would hear, she added, I wonder when she is going to smarten up and dump her husband's worthless ass. Irene is just too good for a man like him. It sounds like you're saying he has problems, I whispered. He does. The rumor is that he likes to use his fists on her when he has had too much to drink, which is quite often. Just hearing that made me want to kick the shit out of him, because no woman ever deserved that. Irene was already at our table by the time we returned. I could have never had imagined that the scrawny kid I had known when we were young would turn out to look this good. I could not help to notice how she brought sunshine to her father's face. She was the type of woman that could capture your attention for the rest of the night, leaving you wondering where the hours went when you said goodbye. Her father's date went to introduce me. Irene cut her off, saying, Jamie, you never forget the man who saved your life. I would recognize Thomas anywhere. Irene got up and walked around the table towards me, so to be polite I stood up. I was just a bit taller than she and I wanted to take in as much of her as I could. To me, she was just that beautiful. Taking my hand, she said, You were about to ask me for a dance, weren't you, Mr. Thomas Richard Davis? I smiled and said of course, while asking myself how I could be so lucky. I led her to the dance floor. I got the impression that there were a lot of jealous men watching us. It was a nice two-step, so it was easy for me to keep a respectful distance. As soon as it over, I wanted to head back because I felt outclassed, but she said one more. Then she leaned in, unexpectedly giving me a gentle kiss on my cheek. I still will have to thank you for what you did back then. My father made me realize how much of a personal cost it was for you, Irene said. I've thought of you often over the years, Tom. I just happened to be there at the right time, that's all, I replied just as the music started. Irene moved into me, pressing her hot right body next to mine. I couldn't help it as we danced the slow waltz. I found myself getting aroused. The scent coming off her sensual body was sending me signals. As a result, like any normal man, I couldn't help responding. Irene in heels was just over 5'8", had long blonde shoulder-length hair, with a body that was built for comfort more than speed. I was never attracted to females who were skin and bone. I liked them like my mother, with a bit of meat. Her perky full breast stood right out as the dress she was wearing allowed one a view of the fullness of her cleavage. She was a full-figured, healthy woman with all the curves in the right spots, and it showed. Her blue eyes when she looked at you seemed to invite you in. I tried not, but I knew she could feel it pressing against her. She smiled in response and whispered in my ear as we danced, "Thank you for making me feel like a desirable woman again." She loved it when I blushed and giggled about it for the rest of the night. When we went back to our table, I felt something had changed, but I did not know what. I guess I thought she was just being polite. Keith's face was glowing. My dad would say later that he had not seen Keith that happy in years. During the first break of the band, Irene explained how I had saved her life when we were young and had been rewarded with it by being fired by her mother because she believed I was assaulting her. It seemed that Keith's former wife had developed a fear of men and then had divorced him when she decided she was going to become a nun. I had started to go through adolescent puberty that last year, and that was why I was let go. I had gotten too big in her eyes. Since then it had been just him and his daughter. Irene and I got into a bit of a discussion about what I was doing with my life. She asked if I had married. I said no, not yet. I just had not found the right one yet and was not seriously looking. I explained about my degree and that I was working for a corporate accounting firm. Irene said it's been nice having an honest conversation with a man that treats me like an equal. Keith's eyes perked up and a smile came across his face. I could see his mind turning. For some reason, he seemed interested in our developing relationship. I'm now the CEO of the board that operates this place. Our comptroller is retiring in 3 months. Would you be willing to send us a resume? Keith asked. So, I can let the board look at it. I said sure. Figuring he was just being polite. Providing I can tour the place to see what I might be applying for with someone who was not in management. Why? Asked Keith in curiosity. By looking at the little stuff underneath the glamour, I will have a strong idea of what's wrong and what's right with the whole operation. Before I would jump into anything new, a few things would have to be brought to an understanding. I replied. I won't go into something blind. I learned the hard way not to after cutting a 2-acre lawn for almost 3 years. That brought out a mutual laugh from Keith and my dad. As soon as the music started, Irene had me back on the floor. The rest of the night I spent my time when dancing, going back and forth with Jamie and Irene. Keith McKibben had handed me his business card with his email address on it. I've arranged a personal tour for you tomorrow at 1 with one of the security guards, Keith said. I spent 4 hours the next day going through the underbelly of things. I learned that a lot of little things did not add up. The current comptroller was nickel and diming everything to the extreme. I decided to do a few background checks on a few things. I ended up being glad I did. I sent my resume to him as per his request a few weeks later, figuring I'd never hear from him again. Boy, was I wrong. My superior at the firm called me into his office one day. Are you not happy here? Thomas, he asked. What brought that question up? I asked. I got a phone call about you from a Keith McKibben inquiring about you. He was doing more than a background check on you. He asked a lot of questions during our hour talk. What's this all about? My superior asked. I spent the next half hour in his office explaining both my dad's and my relationship with him and his family. While I checked out Keith McKibben, he's an important man who owns his own manufacturing steel company. His 5 locations are running 3 shifts. Thanks to the president's favorite view of the steel industry, he is expanding to 6. Most who have been checked out by him personally learned later that he had already decided to hire them. My supervisor said, "Be prepared for the offer that is about to come and give it some serious consideration." Those who have gone to work for his company have had very successful careers, as he's as loyal as they come. Based on what I knew, I began researching everything I could that went into running a country club. I was glad that I did. I was surprised at how little I really knew. A friend's grandfather had been a major player in golf and thought I should talk to him. He got me talking directly with him and I found myself liking him. We burned the telephone lines up quite a few nights. There wasn't a question that he would not answer. What I learned from that older man was worth its weight in gold. It took a couple of weeks before Keith's offer to come in. My supervisor had been right. I would be a fool not to consider it. It more than doubled what I was making. The board wanted me to become the new comptroller of the Meadows Country Club. It was a job offer that I could not refuse. I gave my notice to the landlord. I told my supervisor after he read the offer that if they would meet the offer, I would stay. He didn't have to say a word, I saw the look on his face. After 15 years with this firm, I don't even make that much. This offer would put you in the same wage as my supervisor in this company. My supervisor said, "Take the offer and run. Use the sign-on bonus he's offering you to put the down payment on a house." 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, I slipped into my parents' home using the same key I had owned since being a teenager. My items in my apartment having been given to Goodwill. I didn't own much because most of what I earned went to pay down the costs of my education. I had spent the last 3 years living as cheap as possible. As a result, my education debt had come down fast. The rest, which was not much beside clothing, was in my used car. On Monday, I would start my new career. Not wanting to disturb my parents, I went to sleep on the living room couch. Mom and Dad were surprised to see the following morning and insisted that we would go to the club for dinner and stroll into the lounge afterward for a few after-dinner drinks. I excused myself around 1, explaining I had an appointment. It was with the bank that backed the club. It was a long 3-hour heated discussion which ended up with me signing over my sign-on bonus as security. My parents had no clue why I was home. They were just happy that I was there. We were headed into the restaurant part of the Meadows Country Club for dinner. As we went through security, I was recognized by the same security guard who had given me the tour. I was given a temporary staff identification card, which I promptly slid into my wallet. The security officer informed me that the club had no bartender for the lounge tonight. The general manager had been contacted and was considering shutting it down. I said call him and inform him that no, we won't. It was my bartending license that got me through university for 4 years, I explained. I turned to my parents, excusing myself from them by saying that I would explain things later. I said to the security guard, "Please lead the way so we can get it set up." One of the 2 security guards lead me to behind the bar. Together we found everything. I quickly looked around and was shown by one of the staff how they kept running tabs. Even this system was old and needed major upgrading. Things were as bad as I had expected. There was going to be a 3-person band playing tonight and the dance floor area was just about the right size for the number of seats. I introduced myself to the service staff as the replacement bartender for the night. I took off my suit jacket and rolled my sleeves up but left my vest and tie on. I served those at the bar and kept the waitress busy with the quickness of how fast they got their orders. For some reason, the staff told me it was busier than normal for a Saturday night. I personally thought it was slow. I was busy serving customers at the bar when I heard loud cursing and swearing coming from the dance floor. It had caused the band to stop playing. I slipped out from behind the bar and ran out to the floor just as a huge man was going to slap some woman in the face. He was holding onto her tight while cursing her out while raising his arm. I forcibly grabbed his arm, spinning him around, forcing him to face me. It happened so fast that I could not see who the lady was. A face filled with anger and rage was now confronting me. I prepared for what I knew was about to come. If typical, he would respond without thinking it out. I was facing a lot of problems because there was no way to know what the man would do. "Sorry, sir, I can't allow behavior like this in this establishment. What you are about to do could put us in a possible lawsuit," I said. "You will have to leave and come back when you have gotten control of your anger issues." "Who do you think you are?" he said in anger. "What gives you, a hired employee, the right to tell me anything?" He made the mistake of swinging at me, swearing he was going to kick the shit out of me for interfering. Security came in just in time to see me duck underneath his arm as he took his swing. I then hit back using my full body strength, nailing him as hard and fast as I could straight into his gut, as he automatically bent over in response. I threw a couple of hard ones into his face, aiming for his nose. Everyone in the room could hear the crack of bone breaking as they landed. I had broken his nose. Like all abusers, he was basically a coward when it came to be facing a real man. He gave up without a further attempt. "What should we do with him, boss?" one of the security officers asked as soon as he got to the dance floor. "Throw a set of cuffs on him. If we caught this on video, hold him, call the police and turn a copy of the video over to them. They will review it and lay the charges against him that they think they can prove. Let them know I am willing to testify. Maybe a jail cell is just what he needs until he sobers up. Write up an official report on this situation. That way, if he is a member, the board can seriously consider permanently revoking his membership. We don't want people like him in our establishment doing harm to our reputation," I said. I went to the stage and, using one of the band's mics, I said, "To our valued members and guests, I wish to convey our regrets that this to happen. We will try our hardest to improve our screening process for membership in the future." I walked back to my position behind the bar, giving it no further thought. To me, he was just an idiot who had too much to drink. I had seen lots of his kind of losers in my short life. About a half an hour later, Irene came and sat herself down at the bar counter with her dad's friend Jamie. With a smile, I asked the ladies what they would like to drink. Both said surprise us. So, I make them a drink I called a Thomas Light Tea. It was a drink I had made to impress the ladies back in my post-secondary years. It was poured into a tall glass, which contained a double shot of white rum, a double shot of flavored vodka, with crushed ice with ginger ale. Shaken but not stirred. Both of the ladies tasted it and asked what it was called. I ended up explaining what was in it and what I called it. "What made you come up with this mixture?" Irene asked. "I found it helped me in picking up the ladies in my university days," I said with a smile. "So, did you chase a lot of females?" Irene asked. I blushed and said, "Gentlemen don't tell." Irene noted that it seemed that she could make me blush without even trying and asked, "Are you crushing on me?" I didn't answer her question. She giggled because I guess my face said everything. "Thomas, what do you think of that man who tried to hit that woman?" Jamie asked, trying to change the subject. "He should be kicked to the curb if he is married," I said. "Because if he can do that in public, it has to be much worse for his wife behind closed doors. No woman ever deserves to be treated like that by anyone. He's not a man, he's only a coward trying to prove to himself that he isn't." "You really impressed my dad tonight the way you stepped in," Irene said quietly. "You always seem to find yourself in the right place at the right time." I didn't get to follow up because I had other orders to fill. The next time I glanced over, they were gone. When the bar shut down at 2, we began the cleanup. I thanked the staff for trusting me enough to work with me. One of them asked why the security man had called me boss. I laughed and pulled out my temporary identification to show them. Everyone seemed impressed. I said I don't officially start until Monday. I was just doing what I will always do. "What's that?" one of them asked. "Putting the needs of the club as a whole first." I had to call a taxi to take me home. While I was waiting for the cab, the security guard said I had made a great impression by jumping in and working a position that was beneath me. Most in your position wouldn't have. If you were looking for respect from the staff, you have more than earned it. Those who worked with you tonight now consider you one of the team and will always have your back. You saved those university students from losing a day's pay. Sunday morning breakfast proved to be interesting. My parents wanted to know how I had learned to be a very good bartender and how I ended up behind the counter working. They learned a few things they did not know. Like the fact that I had worked as a bartender in a gay bar to help with the costs related to going to school. That brought out the question of my sexuality. I said, "Relax, Mom, I'm not gay." The owner of the bar would only hire heterosexuals because over the years he had lost too many because of emotional involvement with clients. That's when I told them I was home until I could find a place in which to live because I had found a new job. "You quit the accounting firm." "Why?" my mother asked. "I start my new job on Monday," I replied. "I'm the new comptroller of the Meadows Country Club starting on Monday." When security took me aside, it was to give me my temporary pass. The general manager had been called and was deciding to close down the lounge because of a lack of a professional bartender, so I filled in. The look on their faces said it all. They were very proud. Dad said my conduct last night had said a lot of things to everyone. That is when I found out that the man I had taken down for attempting to hit his wife had been Irene's husband. I asked my mother for their story. Both came from money. She was a lot like her father, easygoing, honest and straightforward. He was a person who saw himself better and smarter than anyone else. It was reflected in his attitude. They had been married for over just 2 years. He had never worked a day in his life and lived off the family trust while serving on 2 boards. The rumors of physical abuse started about 6 months after they were married. No one had witnessed him doing or attempting it until last night. My mother said that my stepping up had saved all from seeing a man abuse a woman. Keith was very proud that you protected his daughter even though you had no knowledge who the female was. After his public display, Irene had decided to leave Evan and was going to stay with her father until her divorce was done. Keith couldn't believe it. He'd been trying to get her to do that for months. He felt a big burden had been lifted off of his shoulders. He asked Irene why now. Irene said it was Thomas's conduct that made me see how useless Evan really is. In ways, I was believing it was my fault. Thomas made it quite clear to me earlier that it was not. "Mom, did that announcement from Irene come before or after Jamie and she came to the bar?" I asked. "Afterward, because everyone was totally shocked when you told security to hold him for the cops and to provide any video we might have," she explained. "Keith proudly said you had sent a message to all who were there that it did not matter who you were or what you were worth, protecting the club's reputation came first." I thought my mom was done, but she added, Irene needed something worth believing in before she could let go and move on. I don't know how, but she found what she needed last night. I then told them both about our short conversation at the bar when Jamie and she had come to get new drinks. "Be gentle with her as she is going to need a lot of time to get her self-esteem back," Mom said. "As far as she is concerned, you reinforced her belief last night that you have always been her white knight." Later, my mother helped me move my stuff into my old room, which thankfully had been updated. "You're more than welcome to stay here for as long as you like," my mother said. "We won't even charge you rent." "Mom, do you realize how much teasing I would face at my age by my friends when they learn I have moved back home?" I said with a laugh. "I would never live it down. Besides, it would kill any chance I had to date. Most girls looking for a husband don't want to date a man who lives at home with his mother." I thought I'd successfully won on that point. But she countered with, "Irene would. Jamie has heard her say many times last night that there's no man that can compare to Thomas. I think she has put you on a pedestal because in her eyes this is the second time you have saved her." I went to work early on my first day because I wanted to explore the operation firsthand before it opened for the day. In order to understand what I was working with, I knew I had to learn each division like it was the back of my hand. Management for me meant knowing every little detail of how our money was spent and why. As my dad said, to watch the little things because they add up. I was out looking at the electric golf carts and I noticed the brand of batteries we were using in them was the cheapest on the market. Yet the carts themselves were top of the line. It gave me a good impression of how the man I was replacing worked. To him, the appearance meant everything as long as it was done as cheap as possible. That explained to me why there had been no growth in this organization for years. The only reason the bank was still in it was because of the value of the land. I asked the Golf Pro shop manager how many times a week were we going out with replacement carts because of battery failure. He told me about 3 times a day or more on average because they take so long to charge. When we have to do that, we have to close the shop because I'm off teaching. As a result, the retail shop is not doing what it could be doing. Do you have the phone number and a contact person from our battery supplier? I asked. He went and printed it out. About half an hour later, I told him the new batteries were on the way. They would take the old ones back after putting the new ones in and credit our account for them. These ones would recharge in 6 hours but could run for days before needing that. He seemed to doubt me. I'm the new comptroller, I said. Let everyone know we will have this shop open regular hours from now on. Also, anything you can suggest that will help to increase sales and the effectiveness of operating this shop as a standalone business, let me know and explain why. If you can convince me, we will give it a try. The look I got from him showed his complete surprise. I knew he would do what he needed to make what was under his control the best it could ever be. Every man who worked wanted to be able to feel proud of what he did. My next stop was the groundkeepers to see what kind of fertilizer we were using, and I found the same thing. The stuff we had on hand was crap. By the time the person in charge and I were done talking, I could see a genuine smile on his face. In 3 months, the greens would be improved a lot. We also set a schedule up for blade sharpening and serving of equipment. I gave my approval for him to hire 2 more full-time staff. Did you know, Mr. Davis, that the club owns enough land for a second 18-hole course? He said. No, I didn't, but I do now, I said. Now we have to find the money to develop it. The key starts with getting the first 18 to be the best in the state. The groundskeeper knew I mean it because of the changes we had just agreed to. I had thrown him a big challenge. He knew it. Based on our conversation, I knew his pride would drive him to do it. My last stop before going to my office was to see the chef of our restaurant. I hit him about opening up for lunch and developing new dishes for a whole new menu. He was flabbergasted that I would want him to do that. I threw him another loop: do you buy from the local producers when you can? If not, you got my approval to do so. I reminded him that the cost of making the plate should be multiplied by 3 to keep us operating in the black. It told him that I knew what I was talking about. He wanted a huge smoker for pork, chicken, and beef. I said to pick out the model and find us the best price. Bring it to the office for me to look at and we will go for it. He put me to the test that same day. When I left that day, it had been ordered and was on its way. I figured out he'd had his eyes on it for months. To him, it was a dream being fulfilled. I knew I had won the chef over by giving him a reason to begin believing in me. I walked into the office. The retiring comptroller took one look at me and said, "You know we're in the red and the bank is wanting changes made." I said, "Yes, I do. Keith told me that over 2 weeks ago. I have been in contact with the bank ever since. He introduced me to his staff. I asked them, which one of you knows the board of directors' wife's best? A lady about my mom's age said I do. I said, follow me, as I led her to my new office. My name is Susan Colbert. Mr. Davis, she said. Susan, please call me Tom, I said. I want you to arrange a luncheon this week with all the ladies, yourself, and me on Friday. Arrange with the chef to serve us. Tell him we want to be used as his guinea pigs for some of his new dishes. Let the ladies know the meeting is being set up so we can begin planning regular ladies' events. They should be able to tell us what they want and what they feel is needed. It's time we brought this club into the current century. Who will be in charge of handling these events? Susan asked. You are. I said. I'm on it right away, Susan said as she headed out the door, her face glowing with excitement. Pausing, she turned around and said, You don't know how long they have been waiting for this. I know all 8 will be there. I told the former comptroller he could start his retirement early as I had assumed control. As soon as he left the office, I called the bank and informed the manager of what was already being done. After chatting for a few, I asked him to plant a leak that the restaurant and lounge would be open to the public on Thursday to Sunday nights for 6 weeks starting next week to give the general public an opportunity to see if they would like to apply for membership. I then placed a local advertisement in the paper for a week on Wednesday promoting that same fact. Thursday afternoon, Susan poked her head into my office, so I waved her in. It's confirmed all 8 will be here at 1 p.m., but I had to agree that you would make them the now famous Thomas iced tea. It seems that a couple of the ladies has tried it and raved about it. Our chef will prepare 6 new dishes, 3 for the lunch menu and 3 from the dinner for all us to try. Who is coming as Keith McKibben's significant other? I asked out of curiosity. His daughter Irene, of course, Susan replied. Most of the ladies showed up early. Susan and I carried in the Thomas iced teas on 2 trays. Irene, of course, showed up last. Man, she looked hot and she knew it. I guess I gave away my interest in her by staring at her a bit too long. I heard someone say she had not seen Irene smile like that in months. The chef brought his first item out and presented it to us. The ladies were delighted to be treated so royally. As they were served, he took the time to explain what was in it and what the retail price would be. The ladies loved their freshness, uniqueness, and appearance. Each was discussed with the chef, who was glowing in pride. One of the ladies asked why this had not been done before. The chef said the previous comptroller didn't believe in or support change. Thank God that we now have one that does. Then we got down to business. By the end of the 3 hours meeting, the ladies were excited. First, we would double the number of dances in the ballroom. Secondly, we would offer it for wedding rentals and use the kitchen staff for the food services if required. The ladies now had to form a decorating committee and plan themed events for the ballroom. I would approach the board with their suggestion of building a structure that would allow the tennis courts to be used all season around yet open them up during the summer. That way we could justify the hiring of a tennis pro. We would set aside one of the private meeting rooms for Sunday football widows when their spouses were watching the game in the lounge. It was the ladies who had to come up with a redesign for it. The last thing I did was a complete surprise to the ladies. I said I would like them each to invite 3 people each who they thought would be interested in seeing this place for the first time and invite them to try for the first time next Wednesday one of our new luncheon menu items at no cost. Before the ladies would leave, I had to make another round of the iced teas. Susan said as we were making them, I have not seen them this enthusiastic in years. Can you really get the board's approval to make all these changes? Between you and me, the only way I would accept this position was if I could do things to turn it back into a want to be in place again. It took the board 3 days to agree. I said, Susan, I want you to find a female bartender that will be able to adjust her schedule for these woman events we are arranging. When you set the first big one up, I want to bring in a special surprise. I said. After helping Susan bring the ladies the fresh drinks, I left them alone. Returning to the lounge, I wrote out the bill for the total cost of the afternoon events. Wrote on it to be charged to promotion and advertising. I did it that way to be able to assign each department their sales and to reflect the profit they should have earned. I was just finishing it up when I noticed Irene standing there looking at me. Dad said you were coming back to breathe new life into this club, Irene said. The golf pro we have is more excited than he has been in months. He's bringing in new equipment lines, new golfing bags, and all accessories including shoes and clothing. He already installing a change room for trying them on. I hear you told him to go top of the line. So is the groundskeeper. Is it true you're going to be adding a second 18-hole course within 2 years? That's up to him. I said, he's first got to make the first 18 the best greens in the state. His problem was not in his knowledge, it was in what products the previous comptroller allowed him to use. It seems management in the past didn't believe that it takes money to make money. With the cheap stuff, you use more 4 times more and get less or no value out of it. In trying to save every nickel and dime he could, he was, in fact, putting the club into a slow death spiral. That is why the membership has been dropping. It's my job to turn it around before we end up losing it. What else is on your agenda? Irene asked. I've got to double our membership within the next year. To do that is going to require me doing and bringing in a lot of changes. I said. For example, the small park at the back of the building that no one uses is going to be converted into a site for an 18-hole mini-golf. I'm hoping that members with children will use it and go to the restaurant afterward. When that is done, the restaurant will be open 7 days a week. My husband got served this week. The board has sent him a formal letter revoking his membership. Thanks to you, he's been charged by the police. I used that to get a restraining order against him. Irene said. Tom, you did it again. Let me thank you by taking you for dinner somewhere besides this place. I'm sorry I can't. You're still a married woman, I said. When you're free, then we will talk. I'm too new in this position to have my name gossiped about, especially with a member. I got to establish myself first. Nice save, Irene said with sadness. Even when we were young, you disciplined yourself. That set you apart even back then from anyone I knew. Even the kitchen staff said you were one who would end up going places. I walked around from behind the counter to her without saying a word. Knowing we were totally alone, I pulled her into my arms before she could say a word. I lowered my head to hers and drew my mouth to hers and gave her a deep, long French kiss. Letting her go while looking into her eyes, I said, "It's just too soon for both of us." Then I walked away. Jamie found Irene sitting by herself crying. "What's wrong, dear?" I talked to Thomas privately for a few minutes and he said it's just too soon for both of us, Irene said, because he's new on the job and I'm still married. What wrong with that? He was just being honest and truthful, Jamie said. I know Jamie, he doesn't want to have any gossip going on, and I agree. Irene said in tears, the problem is that the way that he kissed me. By the time he was done, I knew just how he felt about me. That bad, huh? Jamie said. No wonder you're crying, you poor dear. No. That's good. With that kiss he was claiming me. It was his way of telling me I'm his. Irene said with a smile a mile wide as the tears ran down her cheek. It brought back all the dreams and wishes I had about him when he cut Dad's lawn. Jamie was wondering if Irene was reading it wrong because she was still so fragile. Keith McKibben would be dancing if he could. Never had he believed that it would turn out as good as it did? Bill Davis had done wonders in his new position. His knowledge of how things worked was amazing. In just the 7 months he has been in, he had improved productivity and reduced overall costs in ways no one had thought about. It had resulted in another promotion, but this one he had earned on his own. Keith himself had learned a valuable lesson. Never would have he thought that in trying to save his daughter it would benefit himself so much. Bill's son Thomas was proving himself to be the best move the club's board had made. His daughter Irene was happier than she'd been in years. She had agreed to see someone to help her get through what she had endured. He had finally got his wish. His daughter was getting herself free from Evan McBride. Evan was just like his first wife. They were both self-centered and all about themselves. Appearing to care but proving over time that they didn't. It had driven him to devote more time at work than with her. Irene had been the one that had paid the price. Once she had left them, he tried to be the best father she ever had. He was proud of how his daughter had turned out. Her white knight, without knowing, had brought them both back to life. It had been 4 months since I had been hired. I had just returned from a meeting with a very happy bank manager. I had used my sign-on bonus as a security to get the bank to go along with what I wanted to do. They had just given it back to me. After some further heavy negotiations, he had got it back. That was because the Meadow Golf Club had just put a serious amount of cash down against its overall debt. Our membership over the past 4 months had increased by 20%. That $3,000 a year fee I had used to pay down our bank loan for the first time in 5 years. The club had effectively cut its debt by half. You now had to book your tee-off time days ahead. The greens had improved so much so quickly that they were being referred publicly as being the best in the area. The golf shop sales were up 25% thanks to cart rentals and new stock lines. It was becoming a success. Yet more changes to it were to come. We had turned the golf club from an almost break-even operation to one that now was making a very good monthly profit. The local newspaper had written a review of the restaurant's luncheon and dinner menu, calling our new dishes a success. Our lounge and restaurant were both now permanently open to the public from Thursday to Sunday. The growth in food and bar sales had been fantastic. As a result, the new membership requests were steady. Some university staff had joined, and that had added to our credibility. Thomas iced tea was now the hottest female drink going. When a female asked for a tit, everybody knew what they wanted. The new roof would be going over the tennis court over the winter. Thus, we were starting our look for a tennis pro. Our new mini golf was a family attraction, so was our community pool. As a result, the new members loved to bring their children for an afternoon and then would return for dinner and dancing later. A fitness instructor was now on staff. The pool, the small gym and the tennis court was being used at times by her a lot. In a short time, the members had taken to her. The older ones enjoyed using the pool to exercise in. From the time we were open to the time we were closed, there were people all around. To me, that meant money. The ballroom was booked for the first time by a wedding party for supper and the dance afterward. The chef was excited about it, so was I. It opened us up to a new revenue avenue. This coming Sunday, when the guy watched the game on the big screens in the lounge, the ladies would have their first big event. Susan Colbert was shocked when I told her she had to work in an hour slot for today's current version of the Chippendales. I had come in just as things were winding down that Sunday just to see how things had come together. I ordered an old-fashioned from the server as I sat in the bar. When she brought it to me, she said the bartender had to look it up on our new computer system. Keith saw me sitting by myself and wheeled himself over. "Thomas, you never told me how you got the bank to go along with your plans," Keith said. "I had to learn from the branch manager today that you turned over your sign-on bonus as security when I told him we had accepted his request to be a member. You took a gamble on yourself, and I'm proud of that because it was something I have done myself many times. Then I guess you should know that it is tied up again for the club's future. By using it, we have secured the financing for the second 18. I know Arnold Palmer's grandson and got his help to get his grandfather to design it." Let's just say Keith was amazed and quite excited. Keith said I had put together what he thought was impossible. The board had already approved a huge raise for me starting the first of the month. Keith added, "You don't know how big of a blessing you have been for the club and me personally." "How long till we start the expansion?" Keith asked. "I'll let you know after I talk to the groundskeeper about it all," I replied. A few minutes later, Jamie and Irene walked in. Irene automatically sat beside me, getting as close as she could. Both their faces were glowing. She slipped her hand into mine underneath the table. I didn't pull mine back. Irene let me know in her own way that she was quite pleased. Keith and I learned that the first woman's event was considered a hit by all those who had attended. I gave Susan all the credit. "Oh no you don't," said Jamie. "Susan told us it was you who booked the dancers. They were the hit of the afternoon. It's going to be talked about for weeks." There were over 40 of us that took part in the event. All agree that it was well worth the money they spent. Irene said. The way it was all planned kept us all in a state of excitement. We didn't understand why we had to slip our names into a hat until the 3 names were drawn for a complete makeover from head to toe. Their transformations were amazing. Everyone had to admit that the 3 never looked so good. Their 3 husbands are in for an exciting evening. Each one of them was shocked to learn that there was no further cost to them and went home wearing new outfits. The food the chef made for us was over the top. It was obvious that it was created for a woman's taste. "I think we all overate," Jamie said. "Since you came in and started making changes, it's been amazing. This is a happening place again." He's not done. Thanks to him, the club has now gotten financing for the second 18. Keith added. Our new requests for membership are keeping the board very busy. It has been years since we have seen such activity. "Well, Dad," Irene said. "I hate to break this up, but I'm taking Thomas out for a private dinner that is long overdue, and this time I won't take no for an answer. This is the last chance before Evan gets out of jail, and I'm taking advantage of it. Our divorce is getting to be very nasty. We went to a downtown restaurant. I asked her what had brought this on. I have to make a move, she said. A lot of women were discussing introducing you to some of their daughters or extended family. It seems most believe that you are going places in your life and are great husband material. I'm not dating material, I still live at home with my mom. I laughed. I know she told a bunch of the ladies that and said that you used to work in a gay bar to boot. Irene laughed. I'm going to kill her when I get home, I said seriously. Don't I told everyone we were dating, Irene replied. If they're going to try to set you up, they're going to have to go through me. My announcement took everyone by surprise, so expect a lot of questions from your mother because she's very excited about us being us. I got home about 11 that night. My mom was too excited to sleep. She had 100 questions. I answered none. The only thing I said before heading to bed sarcastically was "Good night, Irene, I'll see you in my dreams." Monday morning, as soon as Susan arrived, she had to give me a breakdown of how it all went. There had been demonstrations of fashion wear, hairstyles, makeup and some specialty items for wearing in the bedroom. While the 3 makeovers were being done, the 10 male dancers had taken the floor. After the big reveal, the food was brought in. As a group, they decided they want us to do it at least once a month. The vendors who took part are just as eager as most of the things they brought they are not taking home. They as a group decided we should have their own hair salon here. We could use the smallest meeting room to set that up. Do you think we could do that? I responded that I would check with maintenance to see how much it would cost before I would commit to doing it. Susan put the word out that day that I would find a way. Saturday night, the ballroom dinner and dance theme set up to be back to the 60s. Those attending had to wear attire from that period. The meal was designed to reflect what was popular back then. On Friday, Irene got her hair dyed black and she was going to buy me a wig. I went through my dad's old clothing stored in the attic and found a suitable outfit to wear. Mom washed and pressed it for me. Man, to me I looked weird. Mom said I looked great. I said yeah, right. She said remember we lived as teenagers back then. She got me there. Irene pinned the wig to my head after I went to pick her up. Keith had to get a couple of photo shots of us because we looked like Sonny and Cher. I had glasses and a bandana on my head. Irene had her hair done in braids. Both of us had no clue as to what Keith was talking about. It was a great party until midnight. The event had been sold out. The winners of the best costumes had been picked. We weren't one of them. Irene and I were on the dance floor when we heard the fight coming from the lobby. I left the dance floor running as fast as I could. By the time I got there, one of the 2 security guards was on the floor bleeding from a knife wound. The second was struggling with Irene's separated husband Evan. He saw me coming towards him and pushed the remaining guard away. Taking his bloody knife, he came towards me in a rush, yelling "You're a dead man" as loud as he could. He was out for blood. I rushed towards him knowing I had one chance. I took it by jumping off the floor, directing my feet towards him. I got lucky and ended up hitting him with both of my feet in his face as he rushed towards me. We both went down hard. I got up before he did and used my right foot to nail him hard in the balls. As he fell, he dropped the knife, which I kicked away. The security guard handed me his cuffs and I put them on Evan, so his hands were secured behind his back. This time he would be going away for a lot longer. Take a look, Evan, at the man who has twice taken you down. Both times without getting a mark on himself. Irene said in a complete rage with tears running down her face because she knew he was coming after both of us. If I could marry him tomorrow, I would. I have just realized I have loved him since he saved my life years ago, and now he is doing that again. Thomas is more of a real man in every way when compared to a piece of shit like you. I'm never going to give him up. You are going to be in for a long time. Remember what you drove out of your life because you needed to make yourself feel like a real man. Someone yelled police officers and ambulance on the way. 2 hours later we got out of the place. It was noted by all that Irene would not leave my side. Not even for the police. We headed to the hospital to see how the security guard was doing. His wife was there. I apologized to her for not being here sooner and let her know he was on full wages until he was cleared to return to work. Call me with the cost of your copay and we will write a check to cover them, I said. His wife was overwhelmed that the club would do that. We stayed with her until her husband came out of surgery. The wounds we learned were not as deep as we thought. I thought we all had gotten off lucky. It was almost 6 a.m. when we pulled into her father's home. We both were exhausted. We were sitting in the den drinking a cup of coffee, just rehashing the events of the night. That's when it hit her, and her tears started flowing. Her ex was coming to take me out first, then her. I just held her, knowing she needed the release. I guess we fell asleep. When we were heard to be stirring, fresh coffee was prepared and brought in. A few minutes later, Keith joined us. Of course, both of our parents had been informed about what had transpired the night before. Keith had called them, and they were on their way over. My mother was bringing me a change of clothing. I could use a guest room to shower and change. The cook came in and asked us what we wanted to eat. I said a cheese omelet with bacon and 2 slices of bread with butter and peanut butter on it. Irene, that sounds perfect for me too. We were busy eating when my parents showed up. All 3 wanted to hear my version of the events. I ended up explaining everything, including the 2 of us going to the hospital. Bill, I have to say that the best investment I ever made was hiring your son to cut my lawn, Keith said. To this day, it's still paying dividends. You should be proud of him. I know I am. Dad, enough of the hero worship, Irene said. If I get my way, he's going to be your son-in-law for a lot of years. Tom will always do what is right. All 3 of our parents looked at me, waiting for a response. We still have to wait until she is divorced, I said to all. The look on all 4 of their faces showed that this was not what they wanted to hear. I just smiled and added, because I won't get engaged to a married woman. Irene looked at me and said, "Smart ass, you did that deliberately." Then she gave me a deep kiss. It took another 4 months for her divorce to go through. Evan McBride had gotten 10 to 22 years for assault with attempt to kill on 2 accounts. The Meadows golf clubs got rented out for our official engagement party, which had an open and free bar. It cost Irene's father, Keith, almost $10,000. The chef went over the top with the food menu, first for the dinner and then late evening snacks. As a result, we got over 100 new membership requests. We had started building the second 18. The ladies had their salon, which employed 2 full-time and 2 part-time staff. Our last month of operation had given us the greatest net revenue ever, as each division was setting new records. Keith and I were sitting in the lounge having a drink, waiting for Jamie and Irene to finish their appointments at the salon. "Have you started looking for a house yet?" Keith asked. "No, we haven't. Irene is busy planning the wedding with Jamie," I said. "When are you going to get off your ass and admit you love Jamie?" "Look at me, what do I have to offer her?" Keith said. "Since the industrial accident broke my back. I've been half a man because I can't walk. She doesn't want me." "Prove yourself right, ask her. What do you have to lose?" I replied. "Take the lead for once. Your daughter did. You've been dating for 2 years, so there has to be something keeping her here. You can always go together and get the ring after." We heard the ladies enter the room. "It's now or never, my friend," I said. Just the ladies sat down. "Jamie, I love you. Don't you think it's time we went and got you your own engagement ring?" Keith said. "It took you long enough," Jamie said with tears in her eyes. "What brought this on?" "A wise future son-in-law," Keith said. "Good, we can sell my place and help them buy them their house," Jamie said. "That's if Irene approves." "Of course, we do, Mom," Irene said. "But we will be okay once I sell the one I got out of the settlement of the divorce. The problem is that I've been taking cooking lessons every day, so really we haven't had the time to start looking." "Cooking lessons?" I said. "Who from?" "Your mother," Irene said, "and the cooks at Dad's home. Though it was hard for your parents to have your mother stay at home full-time, it worked out fine. They were even able to pay a mortgage off. We will have our house paid for." I know that what you have done to involve family things for the club, and it reflects your feelings about fatherhood. It's important to you. I know you will put their needs first. So, I will work till we have our first, then I'm done with it until the children are raised. And how many do you figure we are going to have? I asked. I want at least 3. Irene smiled. But if they are all girls, we will keep on trying for a son. Keith and Janie were smiling. Janie said then we will invest the money and set up a trust fund for the grandchildren's education. Our wedding was a small quiet affair with just family in attendance. It was streamed live to all those in the ballroom. We got married in Keith's backyard by the justice of the peace who stood in front of a tulip tree in full bloom. Keith was my best man, Jamie the maid of honor. Keith later told my dad it was the greatest honor he'd ever received in his life. When the live feed was off, Irene broke the news to all that she was carrying our first. Our first was a girl named after my mother and her stepmother. 2 more girls followed before I got my son. We named him William Keith to both his grandfather's delight. To this day all 4 of our children are spoiled rotten. Our daughters to this day can't understand why their mother gets teary-eyed once in a while when she watches me cut our lawn. Finished.